You everyone for joining us this morning. Good morning. My name's Ona Balkus. I'm the Food Policy Director at the DC Office of Planning. And you are here, you are in the right place if you are here for the first step to government food contracts, becoming a certified business enterprise. So glad to see so many people jumping on the call this morning. The goal of this event is really acknowledging that this is a really hard time for small businesses, generally, particularly small food businesses, wanting to talk about the CBE program as a tool for small businesses who are interested in getting government contracts here in DC, and also having a discussion about ways that we in the government can even better support our small business community, particularly in the food sector, as we continue to go through the public health emergency and also start to move into recovery. So I'm thrilled to be joined by a really great panel of local food businesses and of course, Director Whitfield. So I'll do some brief introductions and then we'll jump right into the conversation. Just as some housekeeping items, please keep yourself muted unless you're talking. There will be time for a Q&A. Also, please feel free to use the chat throughout. You can put questions in the chat. If you want to answer a question that I've asked the panelists, I know we have some small businesses here participating. Please feel free to put those answers in as well. And some of our team and Director Whitfield's team will be adding resources to the chat too. So make sure you have that open and are checking it throughout the event. So joining us this morning, we have Director Kristi Whitfield of the DC Department of Small and Local Business Development, a government agency with a mission to support the development, economic growth, and retention of district-based businesses and promote economic development throughout the district's commercial corridors. This work allows the agency to connect district businesses in real time with local, federal, and global business opportunities, help businesses navigate the government's contracting and procurement landscape quickly, confidently, and effectively, and propel every entrepreneur with a great idea and a comprehensive plan towards the capital to make it happen. And notably, DSLBD is the agency that runs the CBE program. Ben Lin is the lead, the founder and head of Lin Catering, a certified CBE. And from their website, I pulled a sentence about their mission. They strive to give back by supporting organizations that serve their local communities because we believe that everyone should have access to healthy, well-balanced meals. We are passionate about providing all of our clients, regardless of budget, with great food. And then Pinkey Reddick is the founder and lead of Pinkey's E.A.T.S, a certified CBE business. A family-owned and family-run business providing catering, food delivery, and food services that offer healthy alternatives to traditional food fare by integrating fresh vegetables, herbs, and spices into trending menu options that range from vegetarian to comfort and soul food options. So welcome, everybody. We're going to have a moderated discussion for about the next half hour, and then we'll open it up to questions from the audience. But as I said, please feel free to add questions throughout. So Director Whitfield, I wanted to start with you this morning. Can you describe the background of the CBE program and its purposes and goals?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. Great introduction of DSLBD. I was like, oh, I hadn't heard that in a little while. The purpose of the CBE program, simply stated, is to keep local dollars local and to make sure that when the government spends money, that the marketplace is incentivized to use those local businesses. A lot of cities and jurisdictions have goals, idealized goals of where money should be spent, but DC is one of the few jurisdictions that has a minimum 35% spend. And Councilmember McDuffie during the pandemic introduced legislation to increase that spend to 50%. And so, what we do is we work with the companies that come and say that they're local to help certify that. And then we also, as simply stated, we do compliance. We check the math on the back end. DSLBD is not a procurement agency, so we don't have the ability to put local businesses on contracts, but we are the arbiter of the waiver process. And so when something comes up and something has been procured, and maybe the people applying have said, I can't find the local help. We have a system where those waivers, then agencies ask for a waiver, and DSLBD does do the waiver process. And the waiver process, very simply stated, is, someone says, I can't find CBEs. We post those contracts online for 10 days. They're currently also emailed out to the CBE community. And if somebody raises their hand and says, I can do that, then we have the power to pause procurement while the contract officer vets this. We do not have the power to force a contracting officer to put somebody on, but we can sort of hold the door open for a small business if someone that has a skill set that's not being met wants to have a look and have a shake at this different procurements. So we certify local. We help businesses get ready and do a million types of trainings and sessions around procurement. And then we check the math of the agencies that are doing the procurement. So we're around, but not in the procurement process. And let me add one last thing, which is particularly for some certified CBEs that are on here, is that we're actually in the process right now of updating our CBE law. I've heard from every angle on this where, sometimes people say, you make it too easy to get certified, you make it too hard to get certified, all of the things. But what we do know is that there is a gap within the law between the spirit of the law and the written language of the law. And so we have some legislation that has had its first hearing and is currently in markup to modify the CBE statute that helps, I think, close those loopholes, helps guarantee that local businesses are truly local, ensures that they're independently owned and operated, and also helps ensure that subcontractors are getting paid in a timely manner by forcing the triggering of the Quick Payment Act. And so if you are interested in that, that is on our website, DSLBD.dc.gov, and we have a red line version. We also have a high level summary of the changes that we're making. But the overall, to me, I find these changes non-controversial. Some people who have been enjoying the space between the reality and the written, the spirit and the intent of the law, may find some of these changes uncomfortable. And we're having those conversations right now. But basically, we're here to help make sure that anytime there's an opportunity for a small business, that they take it seriously.
Thanks, Director Whitfield, and thanks for bringing up the bill. I'm hoping one of our staff can add the bill language to the chat. Are there still opportunities for residents to weigh in on the bill?
There are. So it's in the markup phase right now, and so if people have thoughts, we'd love to hear from you, and make sure that those thoughts are, well. I've heard some people that I've had to just say, like, yeah, it's because you're not local. So, I mean, like, we're interested. I want to be clear that I'm interested, but I'm resolute about some of the changes that we're trying to make, the fines, the independently owned and operated. But, so I think, but this is why our process, and I'm also currently feeling re-energized about democracy. But the process of being able to have the markup and have the open discourse is an important one. And so I will say that we wrote this, trying to be as thoughtful as we can. My big sort of focus right now in this last phase is making sure that we do not have any unintended consequences for good actors in the law. And so that's one that I'm very interested in.
Thanks so much, Director Whitfield. I'm going to turn it over to our local businesses that are joining us, Ben and Pinkey. Ben, starting with you, why did you decide to become a CBE? And can you describe the process and how long it took you to get your certification? And this is kind of a long question, but what resources did you use to reach out to that were helpful, or what would have been helpful in the process?
Yeah, thank you, first of all, for having me on this panel discussion. And thank you, Director Whitfield, for opening remarks. So, kind of speaking to the CBE process. So, my company, Lin Catering, we, 2013, we applied for the CBE back in 2015. Okay. And we found out about the CBE, Certified Business Enterprise, through one of the Main Streets program. I think I went to one of the Main Streets programs, and a DSLBD representative was there and told us about the CBE program. So back then we were like, well, it doesn't hurt to, as a young business, to kind of go after whatever business there is, especially with the local government, and especially with our mission on trying to bring in bring in business and also redistribute our profits back to local nonprofits and the people around us. So I would say back then, when I did the process like 4 or 5 years ago, it was a lot of work. I do remember it being a lot of work. There was a lot of information needed. I will say that DSLBD was very responsive and very helpful to us as far as getting our questions answered. They could point us, they couldn't get the information for us. It was up to us to kind of provide our own company information and going to the respective departments in the local DC government you had to get certain certifications from OTR, from DCRA, from Department of Health, in addition to just your own stuff, right? Your own business plans. And it was very intensive. I would say it took us about a good 2 to 3 weeks to gather all the information. I do know since then it has been streamlined, which is great, which is I think a good thing. And I do know when we went through the recertification process, and I know Director Whitfield and her team at DSLBD has worked really hard on streamlining the process. When I did the recertification this year, we did the recertification because I think you need it every 2 years, 2 or 3 years where you recertify. 3 years. Okay, 3 years. The process was very simple. I think it took me 5-10 minutes. As long as none of your statuses change, it really takes like 5 to 10 minutes, and then they're really good about following up with you to make sure that you are a certified business, to make sure that you do have a place to operate legally in DC, which I think is a good thing. Did I miss anything else?
No, that was great.
Were there any questions I might have missed?
I know, I asked a lot of questions. No, that was great. And we'll come back to you soon with more questions.
Can I just say that I think in 2018, we launched the first phase of the district enterprise system to try and streamline, a lot of those processes. I think there's always going to be a need for a bunch of information, and candidly, it's because of bad actors, right? It's like because of bad actors, good actors have to do more work and have to be able to really prove. And that's something I'm very sensitive to. But I think that the online version of the certification process, while still holding the bar, is a lot more transparent and less reliant on reams of paper. I've had CBEs tell me, like, I came in and I brought this much paper and I had to do, so I want to say it is getting better, and I appreciate Ben that your recertification wasn't a nightmare. And I also want to say it should be free. And there are sometimes people that will offer to do things like get your CBE status, and not to impede anybody's business model here, but the CBE certification itself is free. And we have people on staff to help when there are hiccups, and so does DCRA. And so what I always am sad to hear is when somebody says, well, I paid somebody, XYZ amount of money, and they help me collect some. I like, listen, sometimes people do need help collecting their stuff, but the program is free. And so if people are told, oh, you need to pay so-and-so to have, it's not that program.
Thank you for the clarification. And definitely agree, you're getting some amens in the chat. So you get some other people agreeing with you too. Pinkey, how about you? Can you talk about why you decided to become a CBE and what the process was like for you?
Hello. So I was interested in getting a CBE because I've always been interested in government contracting. And I was going after like school lunch contracts. And I was in an Accelerator program with Whitfield, and they did a session on how to become a CBE and what you should do. And so I started the process. For me, it did take a while to get my CBE. There was like struggles with the paperwork, and um, I was in a shared kitchen space, and then we didn't have office space. So it was like little technicality, but of course, I reached out to DSLBD, and they always answer my questions and point me in the right direction. So eventually, I was pointed to the right people that can answer my questions and get me certified. So the initial process took about 4 or 5 months to get everything going. But once like I reached out and said, "Hey, I need some help. It's taking too long," it literally took a couple of days, and they got everything pushed through that I can become CBE certified. So that was my experience. And then since then, I did a recertification virtually so far, and that was great. That was really easy. So hopefully it continues to be easy like this.
Awesome, thanks. So yeah, I'm hearing some themes. The initial paperwork is a lift. DSLBD is super responsive if you want to reach out and ask questions. And sounds like once you have it, the recertification process is much simpler. Director Whitfield, can you talk about kind of like the title of this is, becoming a CBE is kind of the first step to getting a government contract. What does it look like on the back end, like when a government agency is looking for a food contract, how do they find the CBEs, and kind of like why is it important for a food business to be a CBE if they want to be competitive for those contracts?
Well, let me say that when I was a small business in the district, I was not CBE certified. And I did, I learned of it, and I thought, I don't know about, I don't feel like the government buys that much food. And now for my type of business, it really did not make sense. And so I'm going to say, a lot of times when people are hunting for things, we're sending people in sort of typical places. Oh, go here and get this certification and get that certification. And so I will answer your question, but I will say, depending on the type of business you have, and Van and Pinkey are perfect types of businesses because they are scalable and can do large contracts. Food is tough, and food is tough in the government because the government does not buy food directly most times. And so unless you are at a size where you are going to get a school contract, or going to get a contract with, Office of Aging, or going to have like a large regular catering, then there are some one-offs, right? So I think it's important to know where the opportunities are. When I had curbside cupcakes, we actually made lunch a couple of times for the construction team that was rebuilding Payne Elementary School. And that was because, they were just being kind to their team and trying to keep morale up. But that is like an indirect way where people can get in, and you can get in without a CBE. So I think, what I want to say is hunt for the work that feeds you the most, and understand a large production of meals. It was lunch for 150. And so I think that, and let me say about that lunch, to somebody in the chat asked, there's like, hey, could you make lunch for our team on Thursday? And like, I'm an entrepreneur. I was like, of course I can. And then they were like, okay, and what would you like? And we're doing this. It was a cold lunch, so that was easier. And then I was like, oh, okay, how many people is that? Well, we need it for 150. Of course. And then I was like, I don't know how to do that, but I'll figure out a way. And I got up to the crack of the crack, and we started slapping sandwiches together. But I think that the construction sites, if you see those construction places, there are places that they need CBE spend in non-traditional ways. And so I think the direct, thinking you're going to get a CBE and then get a big food contract from the government is more rare. And since I'm about, look, I'm about business development, and if you can get those orders without a CBE, and many of you can, then I think the more important thing is, where do you hunt for food contracts? How does the government buy food? The government buys a lot of food indirectly. So the government buys food through event companies and through the construction team on the sites when they want to do nice things. But if you're not in like DCPS or the jail or Office of Aging that have the nursing home facilities, it's not a ton of opportunity for food. And so I don't want to send somebody down a rabbit hole and then have them think, oh, I thought I was going to get all these food contracts. Food is a little weird. But if you can do it, then there are ways to do it, right? And then there are large contracts with DCPS or Office of Aging or the jail or, I'm trying to think of it, maybe Events DC. I think that's right. The subcontracting is really where the food opportunities are. And sometimes those subcontractors need CBE, and sometimes, in the case of mine with the construction, they did not. Nobody asked me if I was CBE. So I would say kind of know what your market is and have an idea of where you think you want to hunt before you go through the lift of being a CBE, because time and money are very short now more than ever. And I think it is hard to, I just want to be 100% clear. Like if you're a drywaller, if you're a tech person, if you're like a contractor, then I'm like, get your CBE certification. Food, I'm like, do it, but do it with a plan of where you think you might want to get those contracts. So it's a little bit of a double-edged sword with food.
Thank you. Yeah, that's such a helpful point. And I, even as we were planning for this, we really wanted companies like Ben and Pinkey to talk about their process, but, acknowledging that like a cupcake company, an ice cream company, a hot sauce company, this might not make sense for, because even, with a CBE, it's hard to imagine the government, having like a large hot sauce contract that they're trying to put out.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's really helpful. Ben or Pinkey, do you want to talk to, since you've been CBEs, what's it been like to, have you had success getting any government contracts or being subcontracted by any contracts? And even if you haven't, what's that like? Pinkey, why don't we start with you?
Okay, so as far as contracts, I get a lot of one-offs. So it may be schools or different DC organizations that prefer to use a CBE, or sometimes they have to use a CBE. So I do get those a lot. And so that allowed me to build relationships with different schools and be able to do events outside of government contracting, like Kristi was speaking to. But one of my, I guess, things that I would like to see different or help with, I guess what I would say that I would like resources. So recently there was a bid for something with mom meals, and it's just some of the requirements are really strenuous. And so I just would like to see more resources to point us in the right direction for being able to accomplish those things. So during the start of the pandemic, we were able to provide those in partnership with World Central Kitchen, and so the amount of meals I was able to produce totaled over 20,000 personally. So we did about 1,500 a week, and I'm like, if I'm capable of doing that, I could really be a prime on my own contract because I can accomplish that. And so I would like to see not just the 35% for small businesses like me, but I would like for DC to see that small businesses like me are capable to scale up and open the door for us not to just subcontract, but to be primes. But so far, I can say that a lot of the one-offs that I have got have been very good in giving me a partnership with a company I typically wouldn't be able to partner with, and been able to build my catering around that. So there's a lot of positives to it as well.
Thanks. Yeah, I think the point about, that you need some, the USDA certification would need to do some of these contracts like schools and senior meals is really important. And I was just talking to the DSLBD team about that yesterday. Figuring out more resources, whether it's UDC or universities and other places that have those food safety teams, and help you navigate that process. I think is really a really important point. Ben, how about you?
Yeah, so my experience with, after becoming a CBE, we did see kind of like Pinkey. So a lot of these different government agencies, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think if they have to use CBEs, they have to first try the CBEs, and your name will essentially pop up like on a CBE list when they search. So in the beginning, we got a lot of like one-offs from different DC local government agencies, like a lunch here, a few events here and there, which was great, and so I think becoming a CBE, there is no, as long as you have the time and the energy and the capital to become a CBE, it doesn't hurt to be CBE. I mean, a lot of the business we got in the beginning was just really these different agencies emailing us for a quote, and because they had to first search the CBE database in order to do a meal, even if it was just like a lunch. And then from there, you develop that relationship with that person or that department, and they can go directly, and then they'll just kind of go directly to you. I will say kind of the ups and downs of that is, the best part, I can only speak from being a caterer, kind of food service, is when they have the time and they can give you, a 1 week, a 3-day lead time, it's amazing, right? Because you can kind of plan everything you need to. But I know sometimes some of these agencies will give us like a 3-hour notice to kind of submit a request for proposal. You'd always have to put together a request for proposal on how much it would cost for your meal. And that can be stressful because, you're like, well, I got 3 hours to submit something. And in the back of your mind, you're like, did they just get this, or did they already have someone chosen and they just have to include a CBE in there so that they have reached out to a CBE? I don't have to answer that. This is just my experience and my own personal opinion. But overall, it was a good experience. As far as subcontracting, like Kristi had mentioned, we were lucky actually enough to get a subcontract last year for, I forgot which department, but we were a subcontractor on a larger contract to supply food for one of the new homeless shelters that they had. And by scale, it's what you do. You do 3 meals a day, anywhere from 75 to 150 people, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And I mean, it was great business. We scaled up. We brought in the people. We brought in, we purchased and we invested in assets to make this happen. I think one of the challenges with at least my small experience of being a subcontractor is at this point, you don't really have a lot of direct contact now with the DC government. You're actually dealing with that private company or that nonprofit that is going after that contract, and they're attaching a CBE onto their bid. And correct me if I'm wrong. So because I think they get some get preferential points, or you get points if you attach a CBE onto your contracts. So that was a little rough. That was a little rough, kind of not having support from the government, because I know they've done a great job, especially at DSLBD and DCRA, on giving us support whenever we had questions, without kind of having that. as far as any questions you may have, questions on your invoicing, questions on what's really going on. That was kind of a challenge. So that's kind of our experience. What I like to see, I think, with the CBE, especially with food businesses and CBE, is a better way for us to get notices of when contracts are available to bid. I think a lot of the contracts, when you're CBE, you can sign up with DSLBD. They send out kind of requests for proposals, solicitations at the end of the day, and they kind of show you like which proposals CBEs can apply for. And so I get those every single day. Most of those, like I say, most of those are contractors, supplies, which really don't apply to. So after a while, when you read those after 30 or 60 days, you're like, well, I don't really want to read this thing anymore if it doesn't apply to me. So I think like if there is some streamlined version where we're directly notified as food businesses, hey, these are things that might be of interest to you, that would be helpful. Or maybe there is, I just don't know, and that's my fault for not doing the research. But that's just kind of my experience.
Thanks, Ben. That's really helpful. We're getting a few questions in the chat about, and Director Whitfield, maybe you can answer these about, is the CBE program like solely about being local, or do you get like additional points if you're women owned or minority owned?
So the CBE program, is about being local, but then in procurement, you do have sometimes different points for women-owned, veteran-owned, working in a opportunity zone. Like there's a point system that the procurement team uses, and I see that yes, Andrew. Thanks, Andre, is putting some of those into the chat. And so I think it really depends. Again, I think this is the hard thing for us is it's intentionally separated, certifying and procurement, and it should be. But to Ben's point, it is hard when the food is a black box and you don't, or any of it is a black box and you don't know. Are you asking me for something to say you had two, or are you asking me for something because this is a real opportunity? And and it's kind of impossible to get that answer sometimes, and we do recognize that. Let me say that with the latest phase of the DES, the District Enterprise System, with our waiver process available online, I'm actually looking into changing the way that we notify the CB community of waivers, because currently we send every waiver to every CBE, and it ends up being a lot of white noise. And we're going to be able to have people sign up. If you want to get all of them, you can, but I'd like it to, so I'm trying to change it with the new legislation to say, we'll post every waiver, but then people can subscribe to the NIGP codes that make sense for them. And, and I think that will get rid of some of the, some of that white noise, because why is Ben Lin getting a drywalling waiver? Why is Chef Pinkey getting something for, pouring concrete, right? Like it's so much that when there is data that you miss it. And then I think that food is one of these things, I think marketing does this too, where in the goal of efficiency, things roll up. But with food in particular, when you're having to tease it out, it's very rare, as I said earlier, that you have a food prime. And so I think that, a food prime, is an interesting idea. I mean, we are talking about, and I think I saw Chad is in here somewhere and some others from Office of Planning. I'm very interested in finding ways to locally source, food to institutions. I continue to be confounded about, why, and nothing against Cisco, but why a large conglomerate is the resource for a school system when we are starting to see the ability to use local infrastructure to meet those needs. And, and to something that Pinkey said, I think particularly when there is food, it's easy to try and make it, a health and safety thing, right? But sometimes it's just a comfort of what I've always done thing, because all of our food vendors, all of our food purveyors have to have, extensive training on safe food handling. I think that, Pinky said there are some things, and I know USDA has some interest. Like there's always some obscure regulation that people have always said is necessary, and I think some of what we are trying to do is ask that second question in some of the waivers. Well, why? Well, why? Well, why? And and sometimes it's like, because this has always been in there. Sometimes you just throw everything in there, and you're like, oh, this has to be. You have to be able to levitate and float in the air and, turn water into wine. And you're like, well, do you really? Because I thought you were just bringing cold lunch to somebody. Can I do that in a refrigerated truck? And so I think looking at where those food purchases are, is important. But I also think what we will fight against is, the sense that it's less efficient, or more expensive, right? And the response that I have been using to that in conversations that I'm having is, only if you take it only at the contract level, because it's not more efficient if you take a half a step back and think about the unemployment that the city doesn't pay for making sure that the people that are local are able to do it, or the dollar values of the real estate when restaurants close, or the cost to the environment of the emissions of all of these deliveries from hither and yon. And so I think I think that it's not something that's going to get solved overnight. But I do think that there are a lot of willing ears to try and find and do things differently. And we're really trying to think innovatively about what some of those solutions might be.
Thanks. Yeah, that's such a good point. I was just on a call about school meals yesterday, and talking about a lot of is there with just like the federal reimbursement being as low as it is. But I think there, like you said, there are definitely opportunities, and even could we be sourcing like certain products from local businesses, like tomato sauce, or going back to my hot sauce example, maybe there is a contract there for a hot sauce.
I might need my own personal, subscription for hot sauce that just has to be re-upped regularly. You never That's know. Right. So somebody put in the chat, if becoming a CBE is the first step to government food contracts, what are the next steps? I would actually say that becoming a CBE is the second step for food contracting. I would say first, you need to find the contact and the contract that you think is in reach, right? And on the OCP transparency portal, you can see all the contracts that are let. You can see which contracts have option years. I would look at who are the people that are doing those things, because the people who are doing those things do have a 35% requirement. And so that they would need to be hiring local at some point. And I would say that the first step would be getting some subcontracting contracts for people that are currently working with the government, so that when you think you're ready to step out, as Pinky had said, I could prime this myself. You will also have the past performance of having been on the contract, because just because you can do it doesn't mean you'll get to do it without the past performance. And so I think that for a government contract, the subcontracting is actually the first step. And then being able to demonstrate that you have fulfilled those things, and then you can step out in your own way. I wouldn't, wouldn't get it. I mean, you can still get it first because the subcontractors might want it too, but I would say have a laser focus on what the contract is you think you're going to be able to get. Those contracts are tough. Those contracts are competitive. And there are a lot of other ways to sort of get your hands on that order or that money. You know, I would say, you know, the construction companies that win big contracts, they do feed their folks, and they have parties, and they have internal parties, and they need CB spend. And when I was very early in this position, you know, the wharf reached out and said, I'm using the same contractor and they're fine, but you know, I want a little variety. Do you have, but I can't find any places, right? And so we walk through how they, here's a list of 11 caterers that are CB certified. So sometimes people are looking for them, but it's, you know, your first step isn't the big, you know, one of the best pieces of advice that I saw that I've heard people get, it wasn't my advice, I wish I could credit it properly, is, you know, out of the gates, don't get a CBE and then go for a, you know, $400,000 contract. Go for an $8,000 contract and then go for a $12,000 contract. Because along the way, you'll build your operations, you'll build your infrastructure, you know, you'll build your own bonding capacity, you know, because the bigger they get, there are some things, you know, with bonding requirements and insurance requirements when you work with the government that you don't really have when you are just catering for friends and family. So I would say, you know, make it a part of your growth program, but don't make it the cornerstone of your growth program. I mean, I don't know if Ben or Pinky have thoughts about that.
Yeah. Yeah, please, Ben or Pinky, join in.
Yeah, I was government contracting. For me, it is just one avenue to bring in money, not my sole focus, but it does help because then, like I said before, with some of the schools, now I every year I do their Christmas party or a Thanksgiving party or things like that. So it is a way to bid, but I wouldn't dare think it would be a primary source of income for my business. Maybe one day.
Yeah, I agree with Pinky on that. I think it's one source of a lot, and you need to figure out, I think, for each business to find, first of all, what's your target and what's your source of revenues, and just kind of add government contracting potentially as a potential revenue as part of a larger pie, and don't kind of depend on it as your sole source of income, especially for food, I think, in the district. And yeah, I mean, a few of them, you know, during the pandemic, we were able to get a contract during the emergency session to cater to one of the agencies. So there, which was really helpful. It kind of helped keep, you know, my employees employed during a time where 90% of our events were being canceled off the books. So you never, I think the opportunities for food as being CB, you never know when they're going to come. But when they do come, they do help. And yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's, you know, you're all just echoing the point that it sounds like you're all making, which is, you know, this can be a tool in the toolbox, not something to base like a whole business on, I think is a really important point. There's been some questions that the certification manager at DSLBD has been answering in the chat. So just wanted to highlight her as a resource. Melissa, and her email address is in the chat, Melissa Russell at dc.gov. I also
would like to say Melissa is amazing. She helped me, like when I reached out to Melissa and told her my struggles with CBE, Melissa made it happen in a week. So she is the best resource. I can say that.
There you go. That's the best. Yeah, applause.
Thanks, Pinky.
I know, thank you, Elijah, for all your contributions in the chat. Just wanted to echo a few of the great points you've made. I'm not going to get to all of them, but you know, outside of the CBE program, just like the challenge of affordable commercial real estate for small businesses, the importance of supporting Black-owned businesses, particularly since Black residents have been disproportionately impacted health-wise, and I'm sorry about the ambulance, economically by the pandemic. And then you also asked a question earlier in the hour about cottage foods and CBE. There's no reason a cottage food business couldn't get its CBE certification as long as you're meeting all of the DC Health cottage food requirements. I do think, going back to the point about what types of businesses can most benefit from the CBE, you can't get your cottage food license if you're doing like catering or that type of like prepared meals. The cottage food license that DC Health gives out is more for products that don't have to be refrigerated or kept hot. So bread, cupcakes, more like shelf stable items. So I'm not sure how many cottage food businesses are a good fit for the CBE program, but there's no reason you couldn't get both. And if people are interested more in the cottage food program, we can share some links. It's a DC Health program for residents who are making food in their homes to sell. And under the new law, you can sell at both farmers markets, but you can also sell to like retail stores for them to sell your products. Please, that's true. Pies are cottage food, yes. I see a question about if you're not a CBE, how can you access information about upcoming food contracts?
So I think there are a few ways. You know, there's the transparency portal where all contracts are listed, or the vast majority of contracts. I think there may be a few sole source contracts that don't get up there quickly. We also on our website have a procurement page, thanks to James Partlow and his smart thinking of my chief of staff, Rosemary Suggs Evans, where we have compiled, you know, I think people, when you first become a CBE, you think OCP is the only place that that procures, and that's not the case. The government has sort of a complex web of procuring authority. So if you go onto our website, there's a page where you can link, where you can see the links for the procurement pages for the other 30 places in addition to OCP that the contracts can be let.
That's a, yeah, thank you for sharing that. And Ben and Pinkey, do you have any, or and Kristi, Dr. Whitfield too, as a previous food business owner, any advice for food business owners that are just starting out, whether it's about the CBE process or otherwise, just how to start up your business, especially during this time?
For me, one of my suggestions and things that I've done so far, I've been in business now 4 years, but every year I join some type of accelerator, whether it's at DSLBD, I've done WAKIF, I've recently done a program with Curate. And these programs just kind of give you different, you know, resources and ideas to better fit your business. And you get to ask a lot of questions, you get a lot of one-on-ones. And that has been very important to me growing from being a very small business to scaling up and being able to do more things. So I would suggest, you know, programs you see that DSLB offers, any accelerators that other organizations may have, even Life Assets. I've joined all of them and they've all helped me in some sort of way, if not in the actual program, but it might have connected me with the right person at a different organization. So I would suggest any new business to get information through going through these classes and things like that, and you know, following up on like resources like this, even, you know, these Zoom sessions and things like that, because they do help, and you find answers to a lot of questions without having to go look for it. Somebody has it right in front of you. So that's my suggestion.
Thanks. Yeah, that's a great point. And I think there we go. In the chat, there's some links to WakeIF, which Pinky mentioned, which is the Washington Area Community Investment Fund, Curate, Life Asset, Latino Economic Development Center also does, I know, courses and technical assistance for small food businesses. So definitely make sure you're taking advantage of a lot of the resources out there. Ben, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the follow up on Pinky is, especially during this time, during the pandemic, where a lot of us need financial assistance, and there are grants out there, there's help out there, but a lot of that stuff requires a lot of information to be asked of you, right? And it's necessary because you want to make sure that funding is going legally and it's not, fraud or someone that's posing as a business. So I would start people starting off. And what I've learned through just past just 8 years is through these programs, probably that Pinky's mentioned, is just to really have all your information of your business together at all times. Like always, before even the product, you're doing it because you have a product or something that sells well or people want it. But if you don't have your books in line, your certifications and the not fun stuff, it will be very difficult to secure any sort of funding, any sort of contracts. And I really think that's at more than 50% of running a business, either small or large, and to be able to scale is that you have the numbers, the licenses understood, and how to run the business. And I think a lot of those programs, if you don't have that experience or need it, will help you.
Director Whitfield?
Yeah, I think of course I echo what both Pinky and Ben have said. I would say this, right? Never forget why you started your business. Most of us start our business, because we either have a super fun idea or we need to find a different way to make money. But usually our businesses are intertwined with our lives and our dreams. And as you scale and grow your business, you should have a clear eye on like who's working for whom. Am I working for my business or is my business working for me? And the back office stuff and making sure that things are actually tight and working, is really important. But the other piece that I'll say is that, as your business grows, grow your business with an exit strategy. Grow your business with the end in mind, because, the day to day can consume every single thing, that you're always doing. When we were ready to grow, one thing that I wish I had done differently, I wish I had not bought my third truck. I wish I had just sunk that money into an investment somewhere for the day when I was gonna, have kids and need to go to college, right? So know why you're working and make sure that you are comfortable that you're on your plan, but that your money and your business are working for you. Now that's not going to be every day. Trust and believe. It's not every day. Because usually we get up, we're trying to make sure our employees get paid, we're trying to make sure contracts are coming in, we're trying to make sure all of the day to day. But I think that entrepreneurs need to be responsible to themselves in a way that we aren't always. We take care of our companies, we take care of our customers, we take care of our employees. And then, when it comes time to decide if you're going to sell or close, you're like, well, what do I have? So, build it strong, build your infrastructure strong, but never forget why you started that business. Maybe I love baking and I love, doing this for people. And, that's very well and good, but, is that what you want to do forever? The same way that corporate person, a non-food person has an exit strategy or succession planning, we need to treat our businesses as the tools for our lives. And, there were many years that I was a slave to my business. I mean, an actual slave to my business, because sometimes I was not getting paid. And so there are phases of that, and that's going to happen, and that's natural, but you got to make sure that you're actively making the choices that push you forward. and that you're getting the help that you need along the way. I think that that's why DSLBD is here, because we all hit those bumps in the road. We all hit those ceilings where we need more money or more capital or more cash flow, but we think that we have to go it alone because the entrepreneurial spirit is about, like, you know, this cowboy thing where we're like, I can do it and I'm a gunslinger. And honestly, nobody's really a gunslinger. Some people were born with access to more resources, and some people were born to access to fewer resources. And as a person who was born with access to fewer resources, I want people to know that, you know, the government cannot do everything for you, but we can do a lot to help. And sometimes the help that you get isn't the help you want. You think you just want a grant, but there are a lot of businesses that have, you know, financial problems that money can't solve, right? So we need to make sure that you listen to even the negative feedback you get, because there's lessons in there, and then make sure that you're on the path that you described for yourself. Because, you know, I saw in the link there, you know, Kuji Chagalia, economic self-determination is what entrepreneurs should be all about.
Yeah, thank you. Such a great point. And so wonderful to have a former food business owner as the head of Department of Small and Local Business Development. In our last few minutes, just wanted to share, if you don't know, DMV Black Restaurant Week. And in addition to the great deals that a lot of Black-owned restaurants are giving this week to customers, you know, kind of in line with what we were talking about and what was happening in the conversation in the chat, just wanted to highlight that they're also having a lot of educational events this week. Tomorrow, there's a session on supporting Black food and beverage businesses through COVID-19. Then on Friday, there's another session on protecting the culture of event planning in the time of COVID. If you liked this event or want to get more involved with the DC Food Policy Council, you can go to dcfoodpolicy.org and sign up for our listserv. We host a lot of events, we also share in our emails and in events grant opportunities from DSLBD, DMPED, other city agencies. You can also sign up for DSLBD's emails. Their E.A.T.S team has an awesome listserv where they share a ton of resources for small businesses. I don't want to miss any. Just please join me in thanking our panelists. Thank you so much for taking the time today, Director Whitfield and Ben and Pinkey. And thank you to everybody, particularly the small businesses that joined us today for this conversation. We really hope this was helpful and are here to support you however we can. So thank you again, and enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Elijah.